The sky city of Aethra floated on two things: an ancient blue stone and the bones of the people it had murdered to get it. They never said that second part aloud, of course. The winged wolves who ruled the floating islands preferred the prettier story, that their glittering city hung in the clouds because their blood was higher, purer, closer to the heavens than the grounded creatures who crawled in the dirt below. The higher your family's island, the higher your worth. And the lowest of all, beneath even contempt, were the grounded, the wingless, the earthborn, the servants levied up from the conquered lands to scrub the floors of the very people who had conquered them. Liora scrubbed those floors. No one in the Sky City knew that the grounded servant girl on her knees in the servants' quarter had been born a princess. No one knew that the wrap around her wrist hid a mark the color of the skystone itself, the royal mark of Vale, the ground kingdom Aethra had slaughtered a generation ago to seize the floating stone it stood on. No one knew that the winged lords who stepped over her in the corridors had, in their father's time, butchered her entire family and sold the last surviving heir up into the clouds as a servant, never dreaming she was anything but one more grounded body to be used and forgotten. Liora knew. She had known since she was a child smuggled out of a burning palace. She had spent 20 years hiding the mark, swallowing the grief, learning to be invisible, learning to survive among her family's killers by being nothing at all. She told herself she wanted only to live. She told herself the fury banked under her ribs was dead. And then, one ordinary day, cleaning a study no other servant dared enter, her sleeve slipped, and she looked up into the eyes of the young winged king himself, staring at the skystone blue mark on her wrist, with the dawning, dangerous look of a man who had studied the fall of Vale and knew exactly what he was seeing. He should have called the guard. His court would have thrown her off the edge of the city before nightfall, the same death they'd given her whole house. Instead, the king closed the door, because what neither of them knew yet was that the mark on her wrist was more than a royal symbol. The blood of Vale could command the skystone, the stone the entire sky city floated on, which meant the servant girl on her knees, scrubbing the floors of her enemies, held the power to bring the whole floating kingdom crashing out of the sky, and a part of her, 20 years grieving, would very much want to. Before we climb up into the floating city of Aethra, if you love a story where the lowest servant turns out to hold the fate of an entire kingdom in her blood, where the slow burn crosses the deepest divide imaginable, and where the fallen princess has to choose between vengeance and something harder, then do me one favor. Hit subscribe and ring the bell, because the moment this sky city learns what it threw away is going to be unforgettable. And drop the word Vale in the comments so I know you were here before the ground rose up to meet the sky. Now, let's meet the girl who scrubs the floors of her family's killers. Chapter 1. The Girl Who Scrubs the Sky. 10,000 feet above the earth, on her knees on a floor of polished skystone, Liora scrubbed the sky city clean and did not look down. Never look down. That was the first rule the grounded servants learned in Aethra, and it was not a metaphor. The floating city was a chain of islands hung in the clouds, and its palaces were open to the wind. Colonnades with no outer walls, balconies that ended in nothing, bridges of pale stone arcing across bottomless gulfs of air. A grounded servant who looked down, who let the 10,000 feet of empty sky beneath the floor climb up into her chest, would freeze, or falter, or fall. So Liora kept her eyes on the stone in front of her, and scrubbed, and did not look at the abyss that lived one careless step past the edge of every room. The stone gleamed under her cloth, pale, faintly blue, catching the morning light with a shimmer that no earthly rock had. Skystone. The whole city floated on it, The great slabs of it beneath the islands held all of Aethra aloft, and even here, even worked into a palace floor, it hummed with the faint lightness that wanted to rise. Liora had scrubbed acres of it in her years in the sky, and she never touched it without a strange, private awareness prickling up her arm, as though the stone knew her, as though it leaned, very slightly, toward her hand. She had learned long ago never to think too hard about that. Above her, the winged went about their mourning, and did not see her. That was the second rule, and the easier one, because the winged did not want to see the grounded. A pair of young Sylvani lords passed through the colonnade, their great feathered wings folded elegantly at their backs, their conversation floating over Liora's bent head as though she were part of the floor. Can you imagine? He actually proposes we lower the tribute levies, as if the grounded contribute anything but the smell. Laughter, light and careless, wings shifting with it. They stepped over her cleaning pail without breaking stride, without a glance, the way you step over a puddle. To be winged, in Aethra, was to be a true person, born high and holy. To be grounded, wingless, earthborn, was to be barely a soul, a thing that walked on the floor because it could not do the one thing that made you real, which was rise. Liora kept scrubbing. She had 20 years of practice at being furniture. None of them knew that the furniture had been born a princess. None of them knew that beneath the plain gray wrap around her right wrist lay a mark, the exact shimmering blue of the skystone under her hands, the royal mark of Vale, the ground kingdom that had once owned the richest skystone in the world, until Aethra came down out of the clouds a generation ago and took it. Took the stone, took the mines, took the kingdom, and slaughtered its royal house down to the last child, and floated home on the plunder. None of the careless winged lords stepping over her had been alive for it. Their fathers had done it. And their fathers had sold the survivors up into the sky as servants, never dreaming that one small smuggled-out child had carried the blood of murdered kings all the way up into the clouds and had been scrubbing their floors ever since. Liora knew. Liora had always known. It was the coldest, hardest thing at the center of her, the thing she banked down every single day, the way she banked down the strange prickle of the skystone under her hand. These are the people who murdered my family, and I am nothing, and I want only to survive. She told herself she wanted only to survive. Most days she nearly believed it. You missed the whole east side, said a small voice. And Perrin says the head steward's doing rounds. Liora looked up. Nessa had appeared at the edge of the colonnade, a grounded child of maybe 7, all knees and enormous serious eyes, one of the servant quarter's youngest, and the closest thing Liora had to a reason to keep her heart soft. The child hovered at the edge of the open floor, with the careful stance all grounded children learned early. Not too close to where the wall isn't. Liora had taught her that herself, had taught her 100 small survivals, the way someone, long ago, had taught them to her. Then help me finish the east side, Liora said, before the steward finds either of us idle. Nessa scurried over, keeping well clear of the open edge, and dropped down beside her with a second cloth. And for a while they worked in the companionable quiet of two people who had learned that being useful and being unseen were the same act of survival. Liora watched the child's small, serious face and felt the old ache, the one thing she could never quite bank down, the fierce and dangerous love for the handful of grounded souls who were, in every way that mattered, the only family she had left. She would do a great deal to keep Nessa safe. She tried not to examine how much. Liora, Nessa whispered, scrubbing. Is it true the king's different? Perrin says the new king's not like the old one. Says he wants to change things for us. Perrin talks too much, Liora said, but gently. Kings don't change things for the grounded, Nessa. Kings are the thing. Keep your head down and your eyes off the edge, and don't hope for kings. That's how you get old up here. Which was, of course, when the head steward's voice cracked across the colonnade. You, Grey Rap. The steward, a winged minor lord with a permanent sneer, whose whole small power was the grounded beneath him, stalked toward them, wings flared for emphasis. He looked at Nessa and jerked his chin. The child, out, and you? There's a task no one wants, which makes it a grounded task. The king's private study. It's to be cleaned, and none of the upper servants will set foot in it. His Majesty doesn't like his papers touched, and the last fool who misfiled a document got sent down the mines. His sneer widened. So we send someone whose loss won't matter. Go, touch nothing but the floor, and if you disturb one page, Grey Rap, they'll not bother sending you down the mines. They'll just find the nearest edge. Liora rose, and bowed her head, and kept her face as blank as the stone. Yes, my lord. She sent Nessa off with a look, and took her pail and climbed the winding stair to the high solar where the young king of Aethra kept his private study, the one room in the palace no grounded servant had ever been trusted or unimportant enough to enter. It was empty when she came in. Beautiful and severe and full of light, walls lined with books and maps, and the strange humming skystone, a great open balcony giving out onto 10,000 feet of morning sky. Liora set down her pail and knelt, and began to scrub the floor of her enemy's most private room, and did not look at the papers, and did not look at the edge. She was reaching for a far corner when the gray wrap on her wrist, loosened by the work, slipped. Just an inch. Just enough. The skystone blue mark caught the morning light and shimmered, and a voice from the doorway behind her, quiet and young and utterly arrested, said, "That mark. On your wrist." Liora went cold to the bone. She turned. The young winged king of Aethra stood in the doorway of his own study, his great wings folded at his back, and he was not looking at her face, the way no winged lord ever looked at a grounded servant's face. He was looking at her wrist. At the shimmering skystone blue mark she had hidden for 20 years, and his expression was not contempt, and it was not confusion. It was recognition. "I know that mark," the king said slowly, his eyes rising at last to hers. "I've spent 2 years reading everything my house tried to burn. I know exactly what that mark is." His voice dropped. "The question is how it's still alive, and kneeling on my floor." Chapter 2. The Mark She Hid. Leora's whole life came down to the next few seconds, and she had rehearsed them 1,000 times in nightmares. He knows. A winged king knows what I am. This is where it ends. The way it ended for all of them. They'll take me to the edge, and they'll drop me into 10,000 feet of nothing, and Vale will finally, truly be gone. She did not run. There was nowhere to run in a room that ended in sky. She did not beg. 20 years of scrubbing her enemy's floors had burned the begging out of her. Instead, she rose slowly from her knees, and she pulled the gray wrap back over the shimmering mark with steady hands, and she lifted her chin and looked the young king of Aethra in the eyes. The first time in 20 years she had let a winged wolf see her look back, and she said in a voice that did not shake, "Then call your guard, Majesty. Finish what your fathers started. You'll find I don't scream. Your house trained that out of my family a generation ago." Something crossed the king's face at that, a flinch, quickly mastered, that she had not expected. He did not call the guard. He stepped into the room instead, and she watched him do it, hardly believing. He reached back and pushed the study door closed behind him, sealing the two of them in together, away from the ears of the palace. "Sit down," he said. "Grounded servants don't sit in the presence of a king." "You're not a grounded servant." His voice was low and strange and very careful. "You're the last living heir of the royal house of Vale, and if you keep standing there looking like you'd rather die than sit, someone is going to walk past that door and read it on your face, and then neither of us gets to have this conversation. So sit down, princess, before you get us both thrown off the edge of my own city." The word princess, spoken aloud by a winged mouth for the first time in 20 years, hit Liora harder than any blow the Sky City had ever landed on her. She sat, mostly because her legs had stopped being reliable. The king did not sit. He paced to the great open balcony and stood with his back to the 10,000-foot drop, as though it were nothing. A winged thing, born to the height. And he looked at her, and Liora looked at him, and for the first time she truly saw the man instead of the crown. He was young, younger than she'd assumed, only a few years past her own age. And he was tired in a way that kings in the stories never were, a bone-deep, cornered weariness that she recognized because she carried it herself. His wings, folded at his back, were the deep gray of a storm cloud. And his eyes, fixed on her, held none of the careless contempt of the lords who stepped over her in the corridors. They held something far more dangerous to a woman who had survived by expecting the worst of everyone above the ground. They held guilt. "How," the king said. "Vale's house was—" The records say the line was ended. Entirely. There was no heir left. His jaw tightened. "I've read the accounts. I made myself read them. All of them. The ones my grandfather's court wrote proud, and the ones they tried to burn after. I know what my house did to your kingdom, to take the stone this city floats on. I know there wasn't supposed to be a single Valen left alive." His eyes searched her face. "And yet here you are, scrubbing my floors. How?" "A servant," Liora said. Her voice had gone flat, the way it always did when she reached for the memory and found the fire still burning there after 20 years. "A groundling, nurse. When the wind came down out of the clouds and put the palace to the sword, she wrapped me in a scullery maid's rags and carried me out through the kitchens while my mother—" She stopped, started again. "She carried me out, raised me among the grounded as her own. Told me every night to hide the mark, still the grief, be nothing, survive. And when the servant-levies came, and I was swept up and sold into the sky like all the other grounded children," she spread her calloused hands. "I simply kept doing what she taught me. Hid the mark. Was nothing. Survived. For 20 years I've scrubbed the floors of the people who murdered my family, majesty, and not one of them ever looked at me long enough to see it. You're the first winged wolf in 20 years to look at a grounded servant's face." She met his eyes. "I don't know whether to thank you for it or to hate you for it. It's the thing that's going to get me killed." The king was silent for a long moment. The wind moved through the open balcony behind him, 10,000 feet of it, and did not touch the terrible stillness between them. "My name is Kaelin," he said at last. "I know that means nothing to you. It's the name of the house that ended yours. But I need you to hear it as a name, and not a crown for the next few minutes, because I'm about to do a treasonous thing, and I need you to understand it isn't a trap." He crossed the room and crouched down in front of her, bringing his eyes level with hers the way no one of the height had ever once done, and his voice dropped to almost nothing. "I'm not going to call the guard. I'm not going to hand you to my court. And I'm going to tell you the thing that should terrify you most, because you deserve to know exactly how much danger you're in. He held her gaze. That mark is not just proof of who you are. If my uncle, the regent, the man who actually runs this court, if he learns a Valen heir is alive in this city, he will not simply have you executed. He will have you thrown off the edge before nightfall, quietly, so fast the story never even reaches me, because your blood is the one thing in the world the winged court fears above all others. A servant girl, Liora said. 10,000 feet up. What could the last of a dead-ground kingdom possibly do to frighten the lords of the sky? Kaelin looked at her, and something grim and certain settled over his tired young face. Drop it, he said quietly. You could drop the entire city out of the sky. That's what your blood can do, princess. That's the secret my house murdered your whole family to bury. And you've been kneeling on the proof of it your entire life. He rose and went to the door, and set his hand on it, and looked back at her. The fallen princess frozen on the floor of her enemy's study, the 10,000-foot drop at her back, and the impossible truth in her ears. So here is what's going to happen, Kaelin said. You're going to keep that sleeve down. You're going to keep being invisible, better than you've ever been, because now there's a king who knows, and a court that mustn't. And when I can arrange it safely, you and I are going to talk properly, away from every ear in this palace. Because I think you're the most dangerous person in Aethra. A pause, and the ghost of something that was almost respect. And I think you might be the only one who could help me fix what my house broke. Keep your sleeve down, Liora of Vale. I'll find you. And he opened the door, and became the king again, between one breath and the next, and was gone, leaving Liora alone on the floor of the sky with a hidden mark, a secret that could end a kingdom, and the dawning, vertiginous understanding that everything she'd believed about her own powerlessness had just been turned upside down. Chapter 3: The King Who Knew. He came for her 3 nights later, when the palace slept and the wind sang through the empty colonnades, and Liora almost didn't go. The message had come the way dangerous things came in the servant quarter, passed hand to hand, unsigned, a scrap of paper folded small. The old observatory. The unused island, West Chain. Midnight. Come alone. See Perrin, who had survived 30 years in the sky by trusting nothing, had watched her read it and said flatly, "That's how a grounded girl disappears, Liora. A note. A dark island. No witnesses. You go out there. You don't come back. And the steward writes fell in the ledger, and no one asks." He was right. It was exactly how a grounded girl disappeared. But Liora had spent 3 nights turning the king's words over in the dark. You could drop the entire city out of the sky. And beneath the terror of it, beneath the impossibility, a thing she had thought long dead had woken in her chest, and would not be still. She had to know if it was true, and there was only one person in the world who could tell her. She went. The old observatory stood on an abandoned island at the far western end of Aethra's chain, a place the height-proud court had let fall to ruin, its dome cracked, its instruments rusted, its skystone dim. Kaelin was already there when she crossed the swaying bridge to it, alone, no guard, his gray wings folded, looking out through the broken dome at the vast wheeling stars. He looked, without the crown and the court around him, simply like a tired young man too far up in the world. "You came," he said. "Perrin told you not to. You know Perrin's name. I know a great many of the grounded's names. That's rather the problem I'm trying to solve." He turned to her. "My court thinks I have a strange hobby, learning the names of the servants, reading the histories my house tried to burn, asking questions no one wants asked. They think it's a young king's harmless idealism, and they're indulging it until I grow out of it." His jaw tightened. I'm not going to grow out of it, and you're the reason it stopped being a hobby. Why? Liora said. It was the question that had kept her awake for 3 nights. You could have handed me over and been rid of the most dangerous person in your city. Instead, you're sneaking out to a ruin at midnight to meet a servant your court would kill you for protecting. Why? And don't tell me it's kindness. I've survived 20 years in this sky by never once believing a winged wolf's kindness. Kindness from the height is the bait on a hook. Kalen was quiet a moment, then he did the thing that, more than anything else, began, against all her armor, to reach her. He didn't defend himself. He agreed with her. You're right not to trust it, he said. You'd be a fool to. My whole life the grounded have been taught to mistake a winged wolf's convenience for mercy, and it's gotten a great many of them killed. So don't trust my kindness. Trust my guilt. If you trust anything, it's far more reliable. He crossed to a rusted railing and gripped it, looking down through the broken floor at the clouds. I inherited this throne 2 years ago, and with it, I inherited the truth my father and my grandfather built their glory on. That this beautiful city floats on a stone we ripped out of the ground by murdering the kingdom that owned it, and that we keep floating by grinding the survivors of that kingdom into servants beneath our feet. I didn't do it, but I benefit from it, every day, with every breath 10,000 feet up. And I've come to understand that inheriting a crime and doing nothing is just committing it more slowly. He looked back at her. I want to change it, all of it. The levies, the servitude, the whole rotten worship of height. And I can't, because the real power in this court isn't the crown. It's my uncle, the regent, and the old wing lords, and they'll gut any reform I try. I've been beating my wings against that wall for 2 years and getting nowhere. His voice dropped. And then, a grounded servant knelt on my study floor, with the royal mark of the kingdom my house destroyed shimmering on her wrist. And I realized, the past I've been trying to atone for isn't past at all. It's alive. It's kneeling on my floor, and it can do the one thing I never could. Frighten them, Liora said slowly. Change them, Kalen said. Or end them. That's the terrible thing, Liora. That's what I have to tell you, because you deserve to choose with your eyes open. He turned fully to face her. The mark you carry isn't only proof of your bloodline. The old Valen kings weren't feared because they were royal. They were feared because the blood of Vale can command skystone. Speak to it. Move it. The legends my house tried to burn all say the same thing. That a true Valen heir could stand on the skystone this city floats on and tell it what to do. Raise it. Lower it. His gray eyes held hers. Drop it. Every soul in Aethra, 10,000 feet up, is alive right now only because no Valen heir survived to command the stone beneath them. And one did. A pause. You've been kneeling on the source of your own power your entire life, scrubbing it clean, feeling it lean toward your hand, and teaching yourself not to notice. Haven't you? And Liora went cold, because he was right, because she had felt it, every day, the strange prickle up her arm when she touched the stone, the sense that it knew her, that it wanted to lean toward her blood. She had spent 20 years teaching herself not to notice. And now the young king of Aethra was telling her that the thing she'd refused to feel was the power to bring the whole murdering city crashing down out of the sky. You understand what you've just handed me, she said. Her voice was very quiet. You've just told the last daughter of a people your family slaughtered that she has the power to kill your entire kingdom. Every winged wolf who ever stepped over me, every lord who murdered my house. She looked at him. Why would you tell me that, Kalen? Why give me the one thing that could avenge everything? Because you already had it, Kaelin said simply. You've had it your whole life, you just didn't know its name. And I would rather you learn what you are from someone who'll help you decide what to do with it, than discover it by accident in a moment of grief, and drop a city full of children out of the sky before you understand what you're holding. He held her gaze steadily. I'm not telling you because I trust you not to use it, Liora. I'm telling you because I think you deserve to be the one who chooses. For 20 years this city has made every choice for you. This one is yours. I only ask that you make it knowing all of it, including that there are innocents up here too. Children, the grounded who'd fall with us. People like Perrin. Like the little one you look after. Liora stood in the ruined observatory at the top of the world, holding for the first time the full weight of what her blood could do, and found she had no idea who she was going to be now that being nothing was no longer an option. Nessa, she said faintly. What? The little one. Her name is Nessa. Liora looked at the king who knew the names of the grounded. If I dropped this city, she'd fall too. Yes, Kaelin said quietly. She would. That's the whole terrible knot of it. Vengeance and mercy don't come clean up here. They come tangled, 10,000 feet up, with the innocent and the guilty holding the same rope. He stepped back. I'm not going to ask you to decide tonight. I'm not going to ask you to trust me. That would be absurd, and you'd be right to laugh. I'm only going to ask you one thing. Give me the chance to show you what I'm trying to build, before you decide whether it's worth tearing down. Come and see the reforms. See the grounded I've already lifted. See whether there's a version of this city worth saving. A pause. And if there isn't, if you look, and you still want to drop us all into the clouds, then at least you'll choose it as the Princess of Vile, with your eyes open, and not as a servant who was never allowed to choose anything at all. Liora looked at the tired, guilty young king, who had just handed his greatest enemy a weapon that could kill his whole world, and trusted her with it anyway, and something in the 20-year wall around her heart cracked its very first hairline fracture. Show me, she said. I'm not promising anything, but show me. Chapter 4. What Her Blood Can Do. She told Perrin everything, because 30 years of surviving the sky had earned him the truth, and because she could not carry it alone. They sat in the deep of the servant quarter that night, in the windowless inner room where the grounded gathered out of the wind and the winged eyes, and Liora told the old man what she was. Not a servant, Vale's heir, the last of the murdered house, and, her voice dropping to almost nothing even here, the carrier of a blood that could command the very stone the city floated on. Perrin was quiet for a long time. He was a spare, weathered man, gray as the underside of a cloud, with the deep stillness of someone who had watched a great many grounded people disappear over the edge, and had learned to spend his own words carefully. When he finally spoke, it was not what she expected. I know, he said. Liora stared at him. Not the stone commanding, that I didn't know. He turned his cup slowly in his gnarled hands. But that you were Valen? Girl, I've been grounded in this sky for 30 years. I remember Valen. I was a young man on the ground when the winged came down out of the clouds and took it. I saw the smoke from 50 miles off. His weathered eyes found hers. And I've watched you for 6 years, watched you touch the skystone floors like they were listening to you, watched you carry yourself like something the Sky City never managed to fully break. I didn't have the word for it, but I knew you were more than gray wrap. A pause. The question isn't what you are, Liora. It's what you're going to do now that a winged king's gone and told you. He wants me to look, Liora said, before I decide, to see whether there's anything in this city worth saving. Perrin grunted. And the other thing he told you? That you could drop it. His gaze was steady and unflinching. You could, couldn't you? Bring the whole thing down. Every lord who ever stepped over you. The court that murdered your house. He said it without judgment. Laid it out plain. The way you lay out a knife on a table, so everyone can see it. I won't tell you not to want it, girl. I've wanted it myself. Some nights, 30 years of nights. Every grounded soul in this city has stood at the edge of a bridge and thought about the fall. Not their own. Theirs. His voice roughened. But I'll tell you the thing you already know, and then I'll shut up about it. If you drop this city, you don't just kill the guilty, you kill me. You kill Nessa. You kill every grounded child who's alive up here, only because they were levied into servitude instead of left to starve on the ground. Vengeance from 10,000 feet doesn't fall careful. It falls on everyone. He set down his cup. So look, like the king says, look hard, and then choose with your whole eyes open, and whatever you choose, I'll stand by you. But choose it knowing. Don't let 20 years of grief make the choice for you in the dark. But before she could look at the city, Liora had to know if it was true. She could not decide anything, mercy or vengeance, trust or flight, on the word of a winged king. She had to feel it herself. And so, the next night, alone, she went down to the deepest level of the palace, to the great foundation vault where the raw skystone that held the whole island aloft lay exposed. Vast, pale slabs of it, humming with the lightness that wanted to rise, glowing faintly blue in the dark. No grounded servant was permitted here. Liora had learned the routes that no one watched. 20 years of being invisible had its uses. She crossed the humming vault to the nearest great slab of raw skystone, and she knelt before it, and she unwrapped the gray cloth from her wrist, and she laid her bare, marked hand flat against the stone. The mark shimmered, and the skystone answered. She felt it the way you feel another person turn toward you in the dark. A vast, slow, ancient attention, the whole enormous mass of the stone beneath the city, becoming, suddenly, aware of the blood pressed against it. It knew her. It had always known her. She understood that now, understood 20 years of the prickle up her arm, the leaning, the sense that the stone was listening. It had been listening. It had been waiting. And now, under her bare marked hand, it opened to her like a door, and she felt, with a clarity that stole her breath, that she could tell it what to do. Rise, lower, hold, or let go. The whole city, 10,000 feet of it, resting on stone that would do whatever the blood of Vale commanded. For one moment, one single, vertiginous moment, Liora felt the entire weight of Aethra, balanced on the edge of her own will. She could feel the exact shape of the vengeance. It would be so easy. A word, not even a word, an intention, and the stone would simply stop holding, and the city of her family's killers would fall out of the sky like the murderers they were, and Vale would be avenged, 20 years and a whole slaughtered house avenged in a single breath. She felt the grief in her rise up to meet it, 20 years of banked fury flaring hot as she had never once let it flare, and the stone responded to the fury, trembling, the great slab shivering under her hand as her rage poured into it. And somewhere far above, in the sleeping city, a child's voice. Not Nessa's, just a child, some winged infant, waking and crying in the night, the sound drifting down through the sleeping palace into the vault. A baby, 10,000 feet up, alive only because the stone was holding. Liora snatched her hand back from the slab as though it had burned her. The stone's attention receded, slow and reluctant, the trembling stilling, and Liora knelt in the humming dark, shaking, her marked hand pressed to her own chest, and understood the whole terrible truth of what Kaelin had handed her. It was real. Every word of it. She was not a servant, not powerless, not nothing. She was the single most dangerous person in the entire realm, a fallen princess, kneeling on the source of her own vengeance, holding in her blood the power to answer a generation of murder with a single, apocalyptic, justified stroke. And she wanted to. That was the thing that frightened her most, kneeling there in the dark. Some deep, grief-scoured part of her, 20 years in the making, wanted to let the stone go and watch the sky city fall. The only thing that had stopped her was a stranger's crying child. Perrin was right, she whispered to the humming dark. It falls on everyone. She wrapped her wrist, she rose on unsteady legs. And she climbed back up out of the foundation vault, knowing two things she had not known when she descended. That she truly held the power to avenge her people by murdering a city, and that she was going to have to decide, with her whole eyes open, whether she was the kind of person who could. Kaelin had asked her to look at the city before she chose. She thought, now that she had better. Chapter 5. The Weight Beneath Her Feet. After the vault, Liora walked through Aethra as a different person, and the city did not know it. That was the strangest part of the days that followed. Nothing about her had changed that anyone could see. She was still gray-wrap, still on her knees on the skystone floors, still invisible to the winged who stepped over her. But she carried a secret now that turned the whole city inside out. Every lord who swept past her without a glance was alive because she permitted it. Every glittering island hung in the sky by her sufferance. She had spent 20 years as the most powerless thing in Aethra, and she now understood she was the most powerful, and the vertigo of holding both truths at once never quite left her. It falls on everyone, Perrin's words, the crying child in the dark. She turned the choice over and over as she worked, and could not set it down. Kaelin kept his promise. He found ways, a message here, a task assigned there, the king's odd interest in the servants' welfare providing cover, to show her the city. Not the glittering upper islands, the other Aethra. The one the height-proud court pretended wasn't there. He showed her the grounded infirmary he'd had built on the lower island, over the Wing Lord's objections. The first place in the city's history where a grounded servant could be treated by a real healer instead of left to die of a fall or a fever. He showed her the levy rolls he'd quietly halved, the mining tributes he'd eased, the grounded children he'd gotten out of the deep mines and into the servant schools he wasn't supposed to be funding. He showed her a grounded man named Toft, who, under the old king, would have been thrown off the edge for a broken serving dish, and who now ran a workshop on the lower island because Kaelin had spent political capital he couldn't spare to make it so. "It's not enough," Kaelin said, watching her watch it. "I know it's not. It's crumbs against a mountain of what my house owes. The whole structure is still rotten. The height worship, the servitude, the tribute. I can only chip at the edges, because the moment I go for the foundation, my uncle stops me. But I wanted you to see that it isn't nothing. That there are people up here who'd fall if the city fell, who never chose any of this, and who might, with time, with help, be the ones who help me tear the rot out from the inside." He looked at her. "That's the thing I can't do without leverage the court actually fears. And you're the only leverage in the world they fear." Liora watched a grounded child in one of Kaelin's forbidden schools sound out letters she herself had never been taught, and felt the vengeance in her complicate, which was exactly what he'd intended, and exactly what she'd feared. because it would have been so much easier if he were a liar. If the reforms were a performance, the guilt a manipulation, the tired young king just another winged wolf baiting a hook. She watched for it. She had 20 years of practice reading the truth under people's words, and she turned every ounce of it on Kaelin, waiting for the tell that would let her hate him cleanly. It never came. He was clumsy and compromised and complicit in a system he benefited from every day, and he knew all of that about himself, and hated it, and was trying anyway. He was not a good man in a simple way. He was a man born at the top of a crime, doing the hard, unglamorous work of dismantling the thing that gave him everything. And Liora, who had armored herself against every kindness the height had ever offered, found that his particular refusal to pretend to be better than he was got past the armor in a way that charm never could have. "You keep waiting for me to be lying," Kaelin said one evening, on the ruined observatory island where they'd taken to meeting. "I can see you doing it, that watchfulness. You read me like a page every time we speak." "I read everyone," Liora said. "It's how a grounded girl survives. You learn to see what people are before they can do it to you." "And what am I?" He asked it not as a challenge, but as though he genuinely wanted her verdict, as though her reading of him mattered more than his courts. Liora looked at him for a long moment, the gray wings, the tired eyes, the guilt he wore like a second crown, heavier than the first. "You're a man who inherited a debt he didn't run up," she said slowly, "and who's decided to spend his whole life paying it, even though he'll never clear it, even though the people he owes it to have every right to spit in his face while he does. You're not asking me to forgive you. You've never once asked that. That's the thing I can't get past." Her voice dropped. "Every winged wolf I've ever known wanted the grounded to be grateful. You don't want my gratitude. You don't even seem to want my forgiveness. What do you want, Kaelin?" He was quiet. When he answered, it was honest to the point of pain. "I want to have been born a different man in a different city," he said. "And I can't. So the next thing, the only thing left, is to help remake this one into something that doesn't need forgiving. I don't get absolution, Liora. I've made my peace with that. A man doesn't get to inherit a genocide and then feel clean because he built a school. But I can still choose what I do with the power the crime handed me." He met her eyes. "Same as you can choose what you do with the power the crime handed you. That's the strange thing we have in common. We were both made by what my house did to yours, and we both get to decide, now, whether that makes us destroyers or something else." The wind moved through the broken dome, and Liora felt, for the first time, the slow burn thing between them stop being merely the pull of the loneliest two people in the sky and become something with roots, a recognition, across the single deepest divide in the realm, of two people trying to become worthy of a power they never asked for. She did not name it. It was far too dangerous to name, but that night, climbing back to the servant quarter, she caught herself hoping, actually hoping, that the city might be worth saving, and the hope frightened her more than the vengeance ever had, which was when she heard the voices in the regent's colonnade, and froze in the shadow, and listened. The king's fascination with a gray-wrapped servant is unbecoming, and it's been noted. The regent's voice, Voss, cold and precise. "I'll not have him shame the wing court over some grounded creature. Find out about her, where she came from, who levied her, why she's caught his eye." A pause, and something in the pause turned Liora's blood to ice. "And if there is anything unusual about the girl, anything at all, you won't trouble me with it. You'll simply see that she has an accident near an edge." The king grows attached to his little projects. Best to remove this one before the attachment becomes a problem. Footsteps. The colonnade emptied, and Liora stood pressed into the dark, her hidden mark shimmering faintly beneath its wrap, and understood that the net had begun, quietly, to close, and that the one thing that could save her, and the one thing that would doom her, were the very same secret. Chapter 6. Across the Divide. She should have run. Any sensible grounded girl, hearing the regent order her death, would have vanished into the lower islands that same night. But there was nowhere to run in a city in the sky, and there was Nessa, and there was Perrin, and there was, she made herself admit it, in the honest dark of her own heart, there was Kaelin. And so instead of running, Liora did the more dangerous thing. She stayed, and she told the king what she'd heard, and the two of them drew closer under the shadow of the closing net, the way people do when the ground is falling away beneath them. "Voss has ordered your death," Kaelin said when she told him. His face had gone very still, and beneath the stillness she could see fury, cold and controlled. "He hasn't come to me. He's doing it quietly, around me, because he knows I'd stop him, which means he already suspects I'd stop him, which means he already suspects you're more to me than a servant." He dragged a hand through his hair. "I've made you more of a target by protecting you. I'm sorry. I keep doing that. Every time I try to shield you, I paint a larger mark on your back." "I know," Liora said. "I've known since the study. A winged king's protection is the most dangerous thing a grounded girl can carry." She looked at him. "I stayed anyway, so we're both fools together." It became, in those tightening days, a strange and secret thing between them. The fallen princess and the king whose house had murdered hers, meeting in the ruins at the edge of the city, drawn together by the very impossibility of it. They both knew what it was. They both knew what it couldn't be. A winged wolf and a grounded servant was a scandal that had gotten people killed. A Sylvani king and the last Valen heir was something the whole realm would tear itself apart over. The taboo of it, the crime that sat between them, the court that would throw her off an edge for existing. Every reason in the world said no. And still, in the ruined observatory under the wheeling stars, they leaned toward each other, the way the skystone leaned toward her blood, helplessly, and past the point of undoing. "This is impossible," Liora said one night. They were close, closer than they had any right to be, the broken dome open to the stars above them. "You understand that, even if I choose mercy, even if I never touch the stone again. You're the king of the people who slaughtered my family, and I'm the heir they think they killed, and there is no version of the two of us that this city survives peacefully. Your court would call it exactly what Voss already fears, the king seduced by the grounded, the Valen witch turning the crown against its own blood." She shook her head and did not step back. "We are the worst possible thing for each other, and I can't seem to stop either." "No," Kaelin agreed softly, and did not step back either. "Neither can I." A pause. "For what it's worth, I don't want you to choose mercy for my sake. I need you to know that. If you spare this city, I want it to be because you've decided who you are, not because you've decided you." He stopped, and something raw crossed his face. "Not because of whatever this is between us. Your choice about the stone has to be yours alone. Clean. I won't be the thumb on that scale. It would poison everything, if I were." And that, his insistence on keeping himself out of the most important choice of her life, when it would have been so easy to use her feelings to steer her toward saving him, was the moment Liora stopped guarding her heart against him, because a manipulator would have leaned on exactly that lever. A manipulator would have made himself the reason. Kaelin was doing the opposite, at cost to himself, and she had 20 years of reading people, and she knew, at last, that this one was true. But the closeness sharpened the stakes rather than easing them, because it made the choice harder, not simpler. Every hour with Kaelin, every reform he showed her, every name of a grounded child he'd lifted, all of it was weight on the mercy side of the scale, and Liora was no longer sure whether she was choosing mercy because it was right, or because she'd fallen for the king she'd be sparing. And she could not untangle the two, and it frightened her, because a choice that big deserved to be clean. It was Nessa who made it real again. The child found her in the servant quarter, late, clutching a scrap of chalk and a splintered board, sounding out the letters she'd learned in Kaelin's forbidden school. Liora, she read, painstaking and proud, and held up the board with her whole small face shining. That's you. I can write you now. Perrin says once you can write someone's name, they can't ever really disappear, because you can always write them back. She frowned. Is that true? Liora looked at the child's careful letters, her own name, written by a grounded child who, a year ago, would have been sent to die in the mines, alive and learning, and named only because a guilty king had spent power he couldn't spare, and felt the whole impossible knot of the choice pull tight in her chest. If she dropped the city, Nessa fell. If she dropped the city, every grounded child Kaelin had lifted fell with the lords who'd murdered her house. Vengeance and mercy, tangled on the same rope, 10,000 feet up. It's true, Liora said softly, and pulled the child close. It's true. Once someone can write your name, you can't ever really disappear. She held Nessa in the windowless dark and understood that she had, somewhere in these tightening days, already begun to choose. Not for Kaelin, not because of whatever burned between them at the edge of the city, but because of the small, serious child sounding out letters in her arms, and Perrin's steady patience, and the grounded who'd fall if she let her grief make the choice in the dark. She would not be the murderer her enemies had made of her. She had decided it without deciding it. She would break the system, somehow, not the people. She only had to survive long enough to figure out how. Which was exactly when it all came apart. Perrin came for her at a dead run. Gray-faced, breathless, the careful stillness gone entirely. "They caught you," he gasped. "The vault. The Foundation vault. Voss had it watched, girl. He's been watching it for days. And last night when you went down to feel the stone one last time." He gripped her arms. "They saw you. They saw the stone answer your hand. Voss knows. He knows what you are. He knows a Valen heir is alive in this city, and she can command the skystone." His voice broke. "He's not going to arrange a quiet accident anymore. He's called the Wing Court. He's going to name you the doom of Aethra, in front of the whole court, and have you thrown off the edge tonight, before you can bring the city down. And he's going to make sure the king can't stop it." Above them, through the servant quarters cracks, the great bells of the Sky City began to toll. The summoning bells, calling the Wing Court to assemble. They were ringing for her. Chapter 7, The Regent's Terror. They came for her before she could run, and this time there was no study door to close, no ruin to hide in. There was only the great wing court of Aethra, assembled and waiting, and Liora dragged into the center of it in her gray servant's wrap, to be named the Doom of the Sky. The High Court of Aethra convened on the summit island, in a vast open hall whose floor was a single slab of polished skystone and whose walls were simply air, a colonnade ringing a 10,000-foot drop, so that the assembled wing lords could look out over the whole floating kingdom they ruled. They filled the tiers now, hundreds of them, wings folded, faces cold, and at the head of the hall, before the empty throne, stood Regent Voss. He was older than Kaelin, silver-winged, precise, with the dry, unhurried authority of a man who had run a kingdom from behind a throne for 2 decades. He did not look cruel. That was the thing Liora had learned to fear most in the Sky City. The ones who did the worst things wore the calmest faces. And when they threw her down onto the skystone floor before the whole court, Voss looked at her with something that was not hatred at all. It was terror, held very still. Lords of Aethra. Voss's voice carried across the open hall, over the wind. I have called you here because our city faces the gravest threat in its history, and it has been living beneath our feet, scrubbing our floors, for years. He gestured at Liora, kneeling. This grounded servant is not what she appears. My investigators watched her descend to the foundation vault 3 nights running. They watched her lay her bare hand upon the raw skystone that holds this city in the sky. He paused, and let the dread build. And they watched the stone answer her. A murmur of confusion rippled through the tears. Voss lifted his hand, and one of his people stepped forward and tore the gray wrap from Liora's wrist, and the skystone blue mark shimmered in the open light for the whole court to see. The royal mark of Vale, Voss said, and now his voice dropped, grave and terrible. The ground kingdom our fathers conquered to secure the skystone this city floats upon. The kingdom whose royal line could command that stone, which is why our fathers, wisely, ended that line to the last child. His silver eyes swept the horrified court. Except they did not end it. One survived. And she has been living among us, hidden, for 20 years, and 3 nights ago, in our own foundation vault, she reached out her Valen hand and woke the stone that holds us all in the sky. He let the silence stretch to breaking. My lords, there is a living heir of Vale in this city who can command the skystone, which means there is one person in Aethra who can, with a single act of will, drop every island, every home, every child in this kingdom, 10,000 feet into the clouds. She is kneeling before you now, and I am telling you that we will not survive her unless we do tonight what our fathers failed to do a generation ago. We end the line of Vale. Now. The court erupted. Fear, outrage, the scrape of hundreds of wings. And Liora, kneeling on the very stone she could command, understood that Voss's terror was not a lie. That was the horror of it. He was right. She could drop the city. Every frightened face in those tears belonged to someone who would die if she chose it. And Voss, cold and precise and pitiless, was simply the one man in the sky willing to say the obvious thing aloud. The only safe Valen heir is a dead one. She's done nothing. Kaelin's voice cut across the hall. He came through the assembled court like a storm. Gray wings flared, and the lords parted for him because he was, whatever Voss's power, still the king. He came to stand between Liora and the regent, and the whole court held its breath. She has lived among us for 20 years, Kaelin said, and dropped nothing, harmed no one, scrubbed our floors while we stepped over her, and never once used the power you're so certain damns her. That's not the behavior of a doom, uncle. That's the behavior of a woman with more restraint than this entire court combined. That she has not dropped us yet, Voss said coldly, is not an argument that she never will. It is a debt of terror we have been living under unknowingly, and now that we know, we cannot unknow it. Would you have this city fly forever at the mercy of one grounded girl's mood, Kaelin? One grief, one rage, one bad night, and we all fall. His silver eyes narrowed. Or is it that the king has grown so attached to his grounded creature that he would rather gamble the lives of every winged soul in Aethra than lose her, because that is what the court is beginning to whisper, and that is a far more dangerous thing for a young king than any Valen heir. It was the trap, and Liora saw it close. Voss had maneuvered Kaelin into an impossible corner, defend her, and confirm the whispers that the king was compromised, seduced, turned against his own blood, and lose the court, lose the crown, lose any power to protect her at all. Abandon her, and she died tonight. There was no move that saved them both. Kaelin opened his mouth, and Voss, who had planned for this, played the piece that turned the whole board. Before the king speaks, the regent said smoothly, the court should know I have taken a precaution. Given the threat this creature poses, and her known attachment to certain grounded servants, I have secured the lower servant quarter. His voice was mild, which made it worse. The grounded of the west chain are, as of this hour, under guard. Every one of them, including... His eyes flicked to Liora, and he saw her flinch, and he knew, the child. The one she looks after. Leora's blood went to ice. So here is the mercy I offer, Valen, Voss said, turning to her fully, and his calm was the most terrible thing in the hall. You are going to die tonight. That is not in question. A heir who can drop the sky cannot be permitted to draw breath. The only question is, how? Surrender yourself. Walk to the edge, and let us end the line of veil quietly, as should have been done a generation ago. And the grounded quarter goes free, unharmed, the child included. His silver eyes glittered. Or resist. Let the king make his doomed stand for you. And I will begin, one at a time, throwing your grounded from the edge of this city. The old man, the child, all of them, until you kneel and accept the fall yourself. The choice is yours, princess. Your life for theirs, quietly, or all of you, loudly. I am a patient man. I can throw grounded off an edge all night. The wind howled through the open hall, 10,000 feet of it, and Liora, kneeling on the stone she could command, looked at the cornered king who couldn't save her, and the cold regent who held Nessa's life over an abyss, and understood that the moment of her whole life had finally, terribly arrived. Chapter 8. Vengeance or Mercy. Kneeling on the stone she could command, with Nessa's life hanging over the abyss, Liora finally understood that she had been handed the exact choice her whole life had been shaped to make. She could feel the skystone beneath her knees. It was right there, the whole city's weight resting on it, and her Valen blood a hair's breadth from the slab, and all it would take was an intention. Voss thought he had cornered her. Voss thought he held all the pieces. But the regent had made one catastrophic error, born of the same height blindness that had ruled Aethra for generations. He had backed a woman who could drop the entire Sky City into a corner, and threatened the people she loved, and assumed she'd have no answer but surrender. She had an answer. She could feel it thrumming up through the stone into her knees. Let go. One breath, one act of will, and the city of her family's killers would fall. Voss, the cold court in its tears, the whole murdering order, 10,000 feet down into the clouds. Nessa would fall too. Perrin, the grounded, the winged children. But it would be over, and Vale would be avenged, and every soul who had ever stepped over her would learn, in one final plummeting instant, exactly what they had refused to see. The grief rose up in her to meet it, 20 years of it, hot and total. Her marked hand drifted toward the stone. And Kaelin, who could not see the stone, who did not know how close her hand was to ending everything, did the one thing that saved them all, and he did it by asking for nothing. Liora. He knelt down in front of her, there in the center of the court, a king kneeling before a grounded servant, and the whole assembled wing court gasped at it. He took her face in his hands, gentle, and turned her eyes from the stone to him. I know what you're thinking. I can see it. You're thinking you could end all of it, right now. His voice was low, only for her, beneath the roar of the wind. And you could. You'd be within your rights. 20 years, and a whole murdered house. No court in any world would call it unjust. His gray eyes held hers. So I'm not going to beg you not to. I'm not going to make myself the reason, or Nessa the reason, or put my thumb on the scale of the one choice that has to be yours. I told you I wouldn't, and I meant it. He drew a breath. I'm only going to tell you one true thing, and then the choice is yours, clean, forever. Say it, Liora whispered. Her hand hovered over the stone. Reform isn't absolution, Kaelin said. I've known it for 2 years, and I've never said it out loud to you, because I was afraid of what it meant. But you should hear it, at the end, from me. His thumbs brushed her cheeks. Nothing I build gives me the right to your mercy. Not the schools, not the freed children, not this. Not whatever we are. I am not owed your forgiveness, Liora, and neither is this city. If you drop us, we will have earned it. If you spare us, it will be a gift we did not deserve and could never repay. His voice cracked. So don't spare us because you think you should. Don't spare us for me. Only, if there's any part of you that wants to be something other than what this city tried to make you, something better than the murderers who made you, then that's the only reason worth doing it. Not because we deserve mercy, because you deserve to be the kind of person who could give it. That's the only freedom Voss can't take from you. The choice of who you are. He let go of her face and sat back, giving her the space. Whatever you choose, I'm with you. Even the fall. And that, his refusal, at the very edge of death, to make himself her reason, his insistence that the choice stay clean and stay hers, was the thing that untangled the knot in Leora's chest, because he was right. If she spared them for his sake, or for love, or even for Nessa alone, then Voss had still won. He'd still made the choice for her, still reduced her to reacting to his threats. But if she chose it for herself, if she chose it because she refused, after 20 years, to let her enemies turn her into one of them, then it was hers. The one thing in all of Aethra that no one could take. Liora took her hand back from the stone. She rose to her feet, in the center of the wing court, in her gray servant's wrap with the shimmering mark bared for all to see, and she was not a servant anymore, and she was not a doom, and she was not the murderer Voss needed her to be. She was the princess of Vale, and she had decided who she was. You've all spent tonight terrified of what I might do to you, she said, and her voice rang out across the open hall, clear and steady, and the court fell silent to hear it. Regent Voss is right about one thing. I can drop this city. I stood in your foundation vault with my hand on the stone, and I felt the whole weight of Aethra balanced on my will, and I felt every one of you a single breath from the fall. She looked around the tiers of pale, frightened, winged faces, and I chose not to. Not because you deserve mercy, you don't. Your fathers murdered my family, and you built a glittering city on our bones, and you've stepped over my people for a generation. You've earned the fall 100 times over. Her chin lifted. But I am not going to become the thing that made me. I will not answer a massacre with a massacre. I refuse to be the doom you've decided I am. Her eyes found Voss. So here is my mercy, Regent. Release the grounded. Every one of them, and I'll surrender myself to you, not because you cornered me, but because I've decided their lives are worth more than my vengeance, and worth more than my life. A pause. Take me to the edge. Do what your fathers did. I won't fight you." The court was utterly silent. Voss's silver eyes narrowed. This was surrender, which was what he'd wanted. And yet it was wrong. It was too composed. The girl was walking to her own execution with the bearing of someone who had won something. "No." Kaelin was on his feet. "Liora. It's my choice, Kaelin." She looked at him, and for the first time all night she smiled, small and certain and unafraid. "You said the only freedom he couldn't take from me was the choice of who I am. Well, this is who I am. Let me be it." And then, lo, only for him, as Voss's guards moved to take her. "Trust me, I'm not planning to drop the sky." Her eyes flicked meaningfully, downward, to the stone, to the city, to the 10,000 feet below. "I'm planning to lower it." Kaelin's eyes widened. And Liora let the guards take her arms, and walked, calm and upright, toward the edge of the city, toward the execution precipice where her whole house had been thrown a generation ago, with a secret plan burning behind her eyes and the entire weight of Aethra waiting, patient, for the blood of Vale to tell it what to do. Chapter 9. The Edge of the City. They took her to the edge of the world to kill her, the same edge that had killed her house, and Liora let them, because the edge was exactly where she needed to be. The execution precipice was the oldest cruelty in Aethra, a great jutting shelf of skystone at the rim of the summit island, open on 3 sides to 10,000 feet of nothing, where the Sky City had thrown its condemned since before anyone living could remember. It was where the grounded went when they broke a dish or looked a lord in the eye. It was where the last defenders of Vale had been cast a generation ago, and now the whole wing court assembled along the rim to watch the last daughter of Vale follow her family into the clouds, and Voss walked her out onto the shelf himself, because a man like Voss trusted no one else to make certain of the thing that most frightened him. "You surprise me, princess," Voss said quietly, as they reached the lip of the abyss. The wind tore at them both. "I expected pleading, or the stone. I did not expect a Valen heir to walk to her own death with her chin up." His silver eyes studied her. "You've decided something." "I can see it. I've read faces for 60 years and yours is at peace, and a woman about to die does not look at peace." His voice sharpened. "What are you planning, girl?" "To do the one thing your whole court has been too frightened to imagine," Liora said. And she knelt, not in surrender, but deliberately, pressing her bare marked hand flat against the skystone shelf beneath her, and she reached, with her whole Valen blood, into the vast humming weight of the city, and she gave the stone its command. Not drop, descend. The skystone answered her the way it had always wanted to, the whole enormous mass of it, every island, every slab beneath every home, waking to the blood of Vale all at once. But instead of telling it to let go, to fall, to answer murder with murder, Liora told it the thing the height-drunk lords of Aethra had spent a generation making unthinkable. She told the Sky City to come down. Gently, wholly, to release the hoarded height it had stolen along with the stone, to lower every floating island out of the clouds and set the whole kingdom safely, softly, upon the ground. The city groaned. It was a sound no one living had ever heard, the deep, tectonic groan of an entire sky kingdom beginning, for the first time in generations, to move. The wing court cried out, the islands trembled, and slowly, impossibly, majestically, Aethra began to descend, the whole floating chain sinking through the clouds, the endless drop beneath the precipice shrinking, the ground that no winged lord had deigned to touch in a generation rising up, at last, to meet the sky. "What are you doing?" Voss's calm shattered completely. You'll kill us all. You'll dash the city on the ground. No, Liora said, her hand flat on the stone, her whole will bent to the slow, controlled descent. That's the difference between us, Regent. You could only imagine me dropping it. Killing everyone, the way your fathers killed everyone, because that's the only tool your court has ever known, the fall. But the stone doesn't only fall, it lowers. It always could. Vale knew that. That's why you feared us, not because we could drop your city, but because we could end your height. Bring the sky down to the ground and make you live on the same earth as the people you spent a generation looking down on. Her arms shook with the effort of holding thousands of tons of stone in a gentle descent. I'm not dropping Aethra, Voss. I'm landing it, and when it comes to rest, there won't be a sky city and a ground realm anymore. There'll just be one world, on one level, and no more edges to throw the grounded off of. Along the rim, the court was in chaos, but not all of it. Because Kaelin had come out onto the precipice behind them, and Kaelin was shouting, not in fear but in command, his king's voice cutting through the panic. She's not dropping us. Look, look, the ground is rising to meet us. She's bringing us down safe. Don't fight it. Help her hold it. And the reformers he'd been quietly building for 2 years, the winged who'd chafed under the old order, the ones who'd staffed his forbidden schools and infirmaries, turned, at their king's word, against the old guard, and the summit island became a battle between the Aethra that clung to its height and the Aethra that was ready, at last, to come down. Voss saw it all slipping, saw the city descending, the court dividing, the king rallying, the grounded about to be freed, saw a generation of terror ending not in the safe familiar way, a dead Valen heir, the line ended, the height preserved, but in the one outcome his whole cold soul could not accept, the sky brought down to the ground. And Voss did the thing that cornered terror always does. He chose the catastrophe over the change. If the sky must fall, he snarled, then let it fall, and let them all see the Valen witch was the doom we said she was. And he threw himself at the great control anchor of the summit island, the master slab, the keystone of the whole descent, and drove his own power into it, wrenching, trying to turn Leora's gentle, controlled lowering into a crash, to sabotage the landing, to dash the city on the earth and kill the thousands aboard it, and blame the fall on the last daughter of Vale with his dying breath. The city lurched, the controlled descent buckled, and Liora felt the whole enormous weight of Aethra tip toward catastrophe as Voss fought her for the stone. Felt thousands of lives, winged and grounded, Nessa among them, slide toward the killing fall she had refused to choose. She threw everything into it. Every ounce of her Valen blood, every year of grief, turned now to the desperate work of holding the city, holding the descent, holding thousands of lives against a regent who would rather murder them all than land them safe. The mark blazed on her wrist, the stone screamed between them. And Liora, alone at the edge of the world with the whole Sky City's survival balanced on her failing strength, felt herself beginning to lose. Because Voss was pouring the fury of a dying order into the stone, and she was only one woman, and the city was so heavy, and she could not hold it alone, and she did not have to. Because a hand closed over hers on the stone. Kaelin's, and then Perrin's, dragging himself onto the precipice, and a grounded miner named Toft, who knew skystone in his bones, and the reformer Silvani, kneeling, adding their wings and their will. And the freed grounded, streaming up from the released quarter, pressing their hands to the trembling stone, the whole other Aethra, winged and grounded together, taking up the weight of the descent alongside the last daughter of Vale, so that she was not holding the sky alone anymore. "Together!" Kaelin shouted, his hand crushing hers on the stone. "Land it together." Chapter 10. Where Sky Meets Ground. She had spent her whole life believing she had to carry everything alone. The landing of Aethra taught her, at the very end, that she never did. With Kaelin's hand crushing hers against the stone, and Perrin's beside it, and Toft's, and the reformer Silvani kneeling with their wings spread and their will poured in, and the freed grounded streaming up from the released quarter to press their hands to the trembling skystone, Liora stopped being one woman holding a city against a regent's fury, and became the center of something far larger. The blood of Vale could command the stone, but it turned out the stone answered best, not to a single desperate heir straining alone, but to a whole people, winged and grounded together, choosing to bring their world down safe. Voss felt it turn against him, felt the catastrophe he was forcing meet a wall of shared will he could not break, because his was the strength of one cornered man clinging to a dying height, and hers, now, was the strength of everyone he had ever looked down on. The master slab steadied under 100 hands, the lurch smoothed back into a descent, and the regent's sabotage, the crash he'd tried to force, simply failed, drowned out by the thing his whole cold philosophy had never accounted for, that the grounded and the winged, given the choice, would rather land together than fall apart. "No," Voss snarled, wrenching at the stone one last time, and the stone, commanded now by Vale's heir and held by half of Aethra, would not answer him at all. He was, at the last, just one silver-winged old man at the edge of a changing world, screaming at a sky that had stopped obeying him. The reformers pulled him back from the master slab. His terror was over, his order was over, and whatever became of him after, a trial, an exile, the slow reckoning of a court forced to answer for a generation of murder, he would face it, for the first time in his life, on the ground. And Aethra came down. The whole floating chain sank the last of its stolen height through the clouds, and the endless drop beneath the precipice shrank to 100 feet, and 50, and 10, and the ground rose up to meet the sky at last, the earth that no winged lord had deigned to touch in a generation, and the great islands of Aethra settled onto it with a long, groaning tectonic sigh, and came, softly, to rest. The city that had floated for generations on stolen stone and buried bones stood, for the first time in living memory, upon the earth. No one fell. That was the thing Liora would hold on to for the rest of her life, that in the ending of the Sky City, in the breaking of a tyranny a generation old, not one soul was thrown into the clouds, not the guilty, not the innocent, not the winged children, not the grounded, not the lords who'd stepped over her, nor the servants who'd survived beside her. The height came down, and the people did not. She had answered a massacre, not with a massacre, but with a landing, and she had refused, at the cost of the easiest vengeance in the world, to become the doom her enemies had needed her to be. In the strange, bright quiet after, the whole city standing stunned upon the ground, the clouds above them now instead of below, Liora found Nessa in the crowd, whole and safe and wide-eyed, and caught the child up and held her, and did not let go for a long time. "You brought the sky down," Nessa whispered, awed. "I brought it home," Liora said. "There's no more edge, Nessa, nowhere left to throw anyone off. We're all on the same ground now." She pressed her forehead to the child's. "You can write everyone's name now. Nobody up high, nobody down low. Just names." Perrin found her too, and the old man who had survived 30 years in the sky by trusting nothing, looked out at the landed city, at the winged and grounded standing together on the same earth in the same light, and something in his weathered face finally, quietly eased. 30 years, he said. I dreamed of dropping it. Every night, some nights. And you. He shook his head slowly. You went and did the thing none of us had the imagination for. You didn't drop it, girl. You ended the up and the down. That's better than vengeance. I didn't know there was anything better than vengeance until tonight. Kaelin found her last, at the rim of the landed city, where the execution precipice now looked out not over 10,000 feet of nothing, but over open, level ground, a horizon instead of an abyss. It's done, Liora said. The height, the whole rotten thing, it's down. She looked at him. I could have dropped you. I stood on that stone and I felt how easy it would be. And you knelt in front of the whole court and refused to give me a single reason not to. Because it had to be yours, Kaelin said. Clean. And it was. He was quiet a moment, looking at the landed city, the winged and grounded mingling in the strange new light. I told you I don't get absolution. I meant it. My house murdered your family, and no reform and no landing and nothing I ever do will make that clean. I'll spend my whole life in the debt of it. He turned to her. But I'd rather spend it on the ground, beside you, doing the work, than a single hour more in a sky built on the bones of your people. If you'll have a king who isn't a king anymore, if you'll have a man who can only ever offer you the work, and never the forgiveness he isn't owed. Liora looked at him, the guilty young man who had handed his greatest enemy a weapon that could kill his world, and trusted her with it, and refused to the very end to make himself her reason, and she found that the thing she'd been guarding her whole life had, somewhere over these tightening days, simply opened. I don't forgive your house, she said quietly. I never will. That's not a thing that gets forgiven. She took his hand. But you're not your house. You're the man who came down out of the sky with me, and I find I'd rather build the next thing beside you than carry the old grief alone. A small, certain smile. So, yes, I'll have the man who offers me the work. Let's do the work. And the last princess of Vale, and the king who had brought the sky down, kissed on the rim of a city that no longer floated, on the same ground, in the same light, sky and earth reconciled, at last, in the two people the crime between them had made, while all around them a kingdom that had spent a generation looking down, learned, for the first time, how to stand level with the people it had wronged. Far off, where the old ground realm of Vale had been, the skystone in the earth stirred faintly toward the blood of its returning heir. Not to lift a city into the clouds this time, but to help rebuild a kingdom on the ground. There was a great deal of work ahead. A generation of wrong to reckon with, a height to unlearn, a veil to raise from the bones the sky had made of it. But that is a longer tale, and it would be told on level ground, by winged and grounded together, for the first time in 100 years, the end. And so the girl they sold to the sky to scrub the floors of her family's killers, the fallen princess who hid a mark that could drop a kingdom, stood at the very edge that murdered her house, with the easiest vengeance in the world in her blood, and chose, instead, to bring the whole sky home. Not to answer a massacre with a massacre, to end the up and the down, to make one world, on one level, where there were no more edges to throw anyone off.